To the youth of this city, I will seek justice on your behalf. This is a moment. This is your moment. Let's ensure that we have peaceful and productive rallies that will develop structural and systemic changes for generations to come. You're at the forefront of this cause, and as young people, our time is now.
That's right! Yeah!
Wow. Joe DiGenova joins us right now. Joe, you were a U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. Now, you were appointed, but it's still a political position. This woman is an elected official. What did you think of the tone she struck there during that press conference?
I thought her press conference was disgraceful. I thought it represented the worst in prosecutorial misconduct. She violated the ABA rules on professional conduct concerning press conferences. She violated the ethical rules of the state of Maryland. She gave out too much information, putting aside the question of how quickly she made her decision. I think the performance was awful. It was 100% political, 0% legal.
We should point out that Joe DiGenova is joining us live from Prague, actually, which is kind of cool.
No, actually, I am standing in Regensburg in the state of Bavaria in Germany.
Oh, excuse me, even cooler. In Germany, Stacey Washington was there quite a bit in Germany, weren't you?
Yeah, I grew up there. Where are you?
in Regensburg, the medieval city just across the line from the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
Bavaria.
Oh, my gosh. I'll have to follow you. Are you putting pictures up for that or on your Instagram?
I will be doing some of that today. We're about to have bratwurst und Bier.
Oh, I wish I was with you. Man.
Well, Joe, let's swing it back to Baltimore for a minute because, you said that when you thought she moved quickly, it turns out, and I don't know if you've even got this news yet, I just discovered it yesterday in the Baltimore Sun, mention at the end of the article that the next step is now to take this before a grand jury. She was not actually charging these cops. She was just announcing the arrests and what the charges will be, but she's still taking this to a grand jury.
Yeah, well, she has to because it involves some felonies, but that's why her news conference was such a disgrace. What she has done is, by this amount of publicity and her public statements, is she has tainted a potential jury. She has laid the groundwork for a change of venue out of Baltimore County and out of her jurisdiction into some faraway county in Maryland like Cumberland. By the way, over here, it has been wall-to-wall coverage of the riots in Baltimore. Sky News, CNN, all the German and Czech newspapers, the International Herald Tribune. Great for tourism when you have a Major League Baseball game and nobody's allowed to go to the grand. Nice work, Madam Mayor and Chief of Police.
Oh, it's so sad that they had to play to that empty stadium. So what do you think about their taking the case? You just mentioned them taking the case out of Baltimore because they have that anti-cop sentiment going on there.
Well, I don't think there's any question that the defense attorneys, all six of them, are going to file motions to move it out of Baltimore. And it's going to be largely based on what the prosecutor did at her press conference. I mean, that was disgraceful. That's something that prosecutors do not do. She's obviously an up-and-coming politician. She's elected to that office. I thought the performance was juvenile, quite frankly.
I want you to listen to Alan Dershowitz. He spoke out about this on Saturday. This was his take on these charges and his understanding of how these officers are going to be charged by this grand jury.
Some of the crowd have said the only reason we got these indictments is because we rioted. They may very well be right. Today had nothing to do with justice. Today had to do with crowd control.
Justice versus crowd control. Let me just be devil's advocate, because of course you're a U.S. attorney, so you're taking the position of whether this is the appropriate way to treat these officers. But it did, with regard to crowd control, it did work. I mean, they've lifted the curfew now. It's peace in the streets. Is it okay sometimes for the greater good to sort of go out and do what this U.S. attorney or what the state's attorney did, just for the sake of getting people out of the streets and calming things down?
No, it's not. It's not her responsibility. Her responsibility is to obey the rules, which she says the cops didn't. Well, I say she didn't. And what she did was she set a tone. She made a political speech. She has dirtied up the jury pool with bias, information.
Yeah.
This is really the kind of stuff that should not happen. It's an embarrassment. The city of Baltimore is slowly making a fool of itself even more.
Well, so when we talk about the violence and everything, once they realize that this isn't the end of it, that it's actually going to have to go to a grand jury to be adjudicated, do you think that the protests will ramp back up and they might have to call for another curfew?
Oh, who knows? I mean, the grand jury is going to bring an indictment in this case. I mean, she doesn't have any intention of using a grand jury legitimately. She's going to put charges before them. She'll ask for them. They'll present some hearsay testimony, and then they'll bring charges. The grand jury is basically a nothing burger at this point.
Well, but that's not what we saw in Staten Island or Ferguson.
That's correct, but I don't expect that from this prosecutor after that outrageously political performance. By the way, the mayor deserves the worst type of criticism for allowing destruction of property as a form of crowd control.
Yeah. And let me ask you this, Joe DiGenova, with regard to the charges themselves. What's your understanding of how the events that led to the death of Freddie Gray could in some way be categorized as homicide, second-degree homicide in this case?
Well, I don't think there's any question that he died in police custody, and there are grounds for investigation and possibly charges. She's already brought charges. I assume there is some semblance of evidence to justify it. When an unarmed citizen dies in custody from a broken spine, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked, and there's a lot of police behavior that has to be questioned. Anything that I've said has nothing to do with the police conduct, which I in this case abhor. All of it. I think it's just disgraceful how that young man was treated. But she has added a layer of lack of respectability to a bad situation that a prosecutor should never do.
Joe, what do you think about the fact that Mosby took a $5,000 campaign contribution from the Gray family lawyer and that she's married to a city councilman?
Conflicts of interest when you have elected prosecutors are inherent in it. It looks bad, it is bad, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it.
That's just, there's no grounds for recusal there.
Oh, are you kidding me? This woman is running for higher office right now.
Wow.
I mean, she's a hot dog. She's a prosecutorial hot dog.
Let me ask you this, Joe. They've said that the injuries that were suffered happened during that ride in the van, and it looks like a big aspect of those injuries and what they're saying could be grounds for the murder charge is the fact that he was shackled at his ankles, Freddie Gray was, and handcuffed, but not strapped in with the seatbelt. And then the bumpy ride then apparently is what caused his death. Is that enough? I mean, it's negligence, certainly. They didn't follow procedure. But is that enough? I mean, at that point, what, the murder weapon is the van?
Theoretically, it could be enough. Yes, the murder weapon would be the van, and the driver is the perpetrator along with other people who conspired with him. It is theoretically enough. Whether or not it will actually be enough will depend on the lawyering, on the instructions to the jury, and whether or not the police officers get a fair judge.
All right.
Because she certainly has tainted the atmosphere for a fair trial.
Ask not for whom the bell tolls. We just heard it toll for you there, Joe, and that tells us it's 15 minutes after. So go have your brats, have your beer, and enjoy Bavaria.
Think of us fondly. Wow.
Auf der Liebe.
I want Joe DiGenova's life. Unbelievable.